Thank you, Chief. So I want to say this is a little different meeting. Corey reminded me a moment ago, this is a historic first board orientation that we've had. But more importantly, I hope that this is an opportunity to informally ensure that our new board members have the opportunity to ask questions and start in January and hit the road running. So let me formally thank Diane Christensen and Lance Waldrop for running for the board, being acclaimed to the board, and now we welcome you. And we're so glad you're here. So I also thought that it was a good idea that our exiting board members, Dave Soto and Janet Jablow, join us so they could share their experience, and also to have all of you here from our labor partners as well as from the executive team to share your expertise and have a chance for Diana and Lance to put names to faces and get to know everyone. So that's really the purpose of this meeting. And like our normal meetings, as I said, this will be fairly informal. If you have a question or there's something you want to add, please feel free to do so. All of our board members now have the new governing board handbook. And those are yours, so feel free to do whatever, write in them, post notes, do whatever, but I hope that you will find them to be helpful. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Mazulis to do a bit of an introduction to the Sedona Fire District.
All right, so again, I echo everything that Helen said and welcome. I just, as a point of order, as she stated, we've got labor reps here from our two labor groups, ASEA and Local 3690, as well as our executive team, with the exception of the fire marshal. And I've asked them to give a brief overview of what they manage, and so again, so you put a face to a name, but that they may exit prior to the meeting's ending because they have all got stuff going on today. So, but we definitely wanted you guys to be able to FaceTime. A little bit about our history. The district really formalized in 1957. A group of citizens that realized there wasn't a lot for emergency response, and it was up, and it was ranchers and folks running orchards. And at the time, we had two districts because of our district is split into Yavapai and Coconino County. So at the time, the law stated they had the two districts. And in the 90s, or in the late 80s, early 90s, we really had one of the most robust medical programs, EMS programs in the state, and really progressive for a small rural district. And then in the 90s, we merged the two districts together and became the Sedona Fire District. And then we're primarily volunteer at the time. And in the late 90s to early 2000s, we really, those folks that had shops or restaurants in town, it was harder and harder to just shut down and come respond to a call because the district was getting busier and town was growing. So really late 90s, early 2000s, we really started transitioning to a career workforce. And today we're a 100% career organization, and we staff 5 stations 24 hours a day, from the village to the top of Oak Creek Canyon and everything in between. And we provide the ambulance service for the community as well. And that's kind of today's organization. With that, I just like to do a round robin and just a brief introduction of who you are and how you fit into the puzzle. Yeah, absolutely. Great.
My name is Lance Waldrop, going on 8-year resident of the city of Sedona, and did volunteer for a short time on the big side of the house with SFD. My entire career has been motor vehicle operations and maintenance, mostly maintenance. And then in the final years of my career in the federal service, I was a CAL FIRE fire mechanic with the U.S. government. So that's about it.
Welcome.
Diana Christensen, been in the VOC for the last 4 years. I retired here from the city of San Francisco, where I was an executive manager coming up from in different forms of investigations, including as the director of investigations for the welfare department. Let's see. What else do you want to know?
It's a good start.
All right.
That sounds like a tough job.
I'm glad to be here.
We'll just go with you, sir.
All right, I'm Bill Whittington. I'm the attorney for the district. I was your lawyer when you merged, back in the Bill Pritchett days, John Conway, that group. When I started with y'all, I had hair. And I won't stand to introduce myself because I'm packing a new ankle, so you forgive me for being rude about that. So I've had the pleasure of representing one of the better fire boards in the state. We represent a lot of special taxing districts around the state, not just fire, but water and hospital and those kinds of things. And Sedona is on the top of the list around the state. And you can compare them to any county or city governing board there is. Management has figured out how to do this right. Sedona can be proud of that.
I'll stand up. Josh Maxwell, we introduced or talked to you earlier. Been with Sedona Fire 28 years now. My parents were involved back when Bill was involved early on, so been around the fire service since about 82 here in Sedona. I get the joy and the pleasure of being our trustee for B shift now, and just got reelected in October. So we'll be meeting with management for this year's MOU and talking with the board in the future. So that is all. Thank you.
He's also.
Yes.
My name is Brian Ford. I've been with Sedona Fire since 2005, started as a reserve and then was hired full-time in 2008. I'm currently a captain A shift at the Chapel Station, Station 6. And I was also recently elected to the trustee position in October. So I'm new to this. I've got a lot to learn and I look forward to working with all of you.
Hi, Lance. Welcome back. My name is Chris Ahern. I'm Jordan and Buzz's assistant. So I work in training in EMS and ambulance. And I'm also an ASCA rep. My cohort.
All right, so I am the cohort. I'm Matt Spinelli. I'm the GIS analyst here at Sedona Fire. I work directly under Buzz. I've been here a little over 2 years. Have, I don't know, 15, 16 years of federal, local, and private sector experience consulting. I've kind of been all over the place. I like to think that I bring some fresh eyes to things. So yeah, I'm an ASCA rep, so we represent the administrative and support side of the house. I'm learning a lot from Chris since I'm much newer. Only been here, like I said, about 2 years. So look forward to working with you.
And to clarify, so that local 3690 represents our operational folks and the ASCA represents telecom, administration, fleet, all the supporting services.
And I should also add, I couldn't hear you say it, Matt also is responsible for our GIS, our Geographic Information System.
He did.
He did,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'm the map and data guy. And the
What about some of the
dashboard guy.
acronyms, they run together sometimes.
The magic man.
Actually said that one out though.
Well, that's probably it.
Yeah, that's what did it. Buzz Lukowski, nice to meet you. Hello, Lance. Matt said, and his position ends up being sort of the end of a funnel a lot of times with a lot of other things. We're like, Matt's probably good at that, just based on where we saw his skills. So GIS is a piece of it, but he ends up running a lot of their programs and projects for us too. So I started here in 1997 as a volunteer and currently a division chief. Let's see, primarily EMS. So that would be everything
from like the fire engines that all have paramedics on them, the ambulances, the training that goes along with that, the ambulance billing, compliance, stuff like that. And sometimes IT, it depends on what's going on. A little bit of IT, GIS, the internal employee mental wellness stuff falls under me. Fleet falls under me. I think that's, can't imagine. Oh, dispatch stuff too falls under me. So yeah, that's it.
We do need a good title for Buzz. We still haven't come up with one, I don't think.
The acronyms get really goofy. Kim and Chief Quill mess with it a lot. It ends up being borderline inappropriate, but also really doesn't describe anything that they do.
It's tough. It's tough.
Not for me.
Nice to meet you. My name's, good to see you, Lance. My name's Jason Coyle. I'm the Assistant Chief. So I oversee operations through 3 battalion chiefs. That one is in charge of is the shift commander, if you will, for each one of the 3 shifts, A, B, and C shift. And then human resources. So human resources also includes pay and benefits under the human resources office, and then administration. Let's see, in addition to that, what do? I also am usually the principal for internal investigations, the one that conducts the investigation in combination with human resources, and then presents the finding to the chief along with recommendations. Yeah, that's.
You might mention Roland Baldwin.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm also an operations section chief on one of the national incident management teams. And I've been deployed to almost 100 incidents of national significance, and then also hurricanes, some flooding events, and then one search. So, over the past 20 years. And I've been with the Sedona Fire District for 27 years. Anything else? Other things of relevance? Yeah, that's a big thing right now, homeowners insurance.
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Baker. Much like Mr. Whittington, when I started here, I had a bit more hair, not a lot more hair, but a bit more than I do now.
It's marginal.
In my 23rd year here with Sedona Fire, 25th year in the fire service. I started at Verde Valley Fire. It used to be Cornville Page Springs Fire, then merged with Verde Rural, which is now Verde Valley Fire. My job here is Division Chief of Training and Development. So everything non-EMS suppression, extrication training, that falls under my purview in my division. Also in charge of development, holding leadership academies, trying to bring up future leaders and planning for succession, planning for roles as people retire and promote on to fill those roles as they move on in the organization. Also in charge of wellness. So that kind of encompasses tracking injuries as well as expenses associated with those injuries and measures we can take to prevent future injuries that we've identified as preventable. So implementing new programs for functional movement screenings and employee health and wellness all fall under my purview in my division.
My name is David Rodriguez. I'm the president for Sedona Verde Valley Firefighters Association. I made the SFD team in 2005 and currently work as a captain at Station 4 in uptown Sedona. As part of my job as my why as being a union president is to ensure, that we're operating within the parameters of wages, benefits, working condition, and political action. So my role in those things is to ensure healthy labor management relationship, mutual respect, trust, accountability, going both ways through the labor side. And then as far as meeting with elected officials, I've met with most of you, county supervisors, elected officials at the state legislature, and congressional candidates as well. So I operate in different capacities. I work with all of the fire chiefs in the Verde Valley. There's only 2 others. And then we have 4 chapters within our local and just a little over 200 members. And we've grown that since 2012 from right around 160 to over 200. I relieved Ed of his duties as president before he promoted on to battalion chief. He is a friend, a mentor, has helped me a lot along the way doing the union stuff. And so that's as well as the other guys to my left here. And so the not present today is Greg Eberline. He's a trustee. And our vice president in Sedona is Jarrett Tarver, and him and his team. Their responsibility is meeting with management, building relationships, finding solutions to all of the things that impact wages, benefits, working conditions. So that's essentially what I do. So.
Yeah, you're gonna make me introduce myself.
You don't have to stand up. You don't have to stand up.
Anybody with hardware should not stand up.
A lot like Mr. Whittington, I too have a bad gam, so, I'm Kim Smathers. I have been with Sedona Fire. Next month, it'll be 3 years. I came from federal service. Always kind of been involved with admin. So, I'm your go-to, I guess, for most things board. I'm gonna say something. I thought he was.
Oh.
Oh.
I was making sure you said that part.
The steel second sign there for a minute.
She's the radar, the radar O'Reilly for the executive team and the Rolodex for the board. If you're like, hey, I have a question about, then she can tell you who to talk to.
Fun fact, Kim's family and my sister live in the same small town in Idaho. Found that out after she got here.
If I can wrap the introductions, you saw a common theme in our executive management team and some of our other vote, 20 plus years. A lot of people have been here a while, and that's a blessing and it's not a curse, but it's a concern because we're currently working on a strategic plan redo. We dubbed it Sedona Fire District 2030, and the reason for that is in 2030, half of this table is going to evaporate from Sedona Fire, and we're at a point in we did some restructuring with the management team a year ago, and we have a focus on not only recruitment, retention, but internal succession planning and development, because 5 years goes by fast, and we're putting a lot of efforts into preparing the best we can to make sure that we can keep our promotions internal, because we've discovered over the years through trials and tribulations that if we can grow our own into the different positions, they have that legacy knowledge and experience. Whereas sometimes if we get a continuous revolving door of management themes from out of state or out of town, kind of hit a reset button a lot. And we're making some gains in a positive way for the district's longevity and for the community, and we want to keep that going. So yeah, we get people and we hang on to them for a while. So
Thank you, Chief. And yes, definitely, that is a priority. I don't want any of you to evaporate. Please don't evaporate. Okay. One of the things was new to me when I joined the board was what it means to be a board member in an organization like the fire district in a special taxing district, and the rules and regulations that go with it. And so what I've asked is if Mr. Whittington, Bill, would fill us in on some of the legal responsibilities of a board member that you really need to know about and understand for everyone's benefit, but also for your own. So Bill, if you would fill us in and talk about the legal responsibilities of a board member, that would be great.
Be glad to. As is probably typical, I brought handouts. So I'll shift them your way. You're the best. Thank you.
Now you know why we gave you a big book.
One more?
I got more here if you need them.
I'll throw the end a lot, but. One. Dave's like, I'm good. You should know what it is.
Yes, I should. Thank you.
Thank
I helped Bill.
Oh.
For the records.
Oh, thank you.
This again, Bill? This again?
As a fire board member, as many of you know, good or bad, the legislature's kind of picked on you. And they require that you receive at least 6 hours of continuing education every election cycle. It's coming up again in January of 2025. I teach some classes, about 3 hours worth of classes at that conference. And I've synthesized some of those materials for today's 20 minutes so that I don't eat up too much of your time today. But I wanted to share with you a few things I've noticed over the years that fire board members need to be aware of. And so this handout, I'm going to show you what's in this handout so we don't have to be perusing it during this next 20 minutes. You can ask all the questions you want about it or any of it or anything I have to say in the next 20 minutes or so. But I wanted to give some things, some takeaways to you because we'll touch on them during that 20 minutes. The first thing in your packet is just an outline of the orientation that we're going to cover in the next 20 minutes. The next is a summary of what the open meeting law violations look like. The next handout is a part of the statute that describes the 9 reasons you can break away into an executive session. So, and those are the only reasons you can go into executive session. The next handout is a highlighted copy of a table of consanguinity. And this is a conflict of interest table, and it's intended to describe the people that you cannot participate for if you're considering action as a board member. We'll talk about why that is. The next is a certificate of compliance. I invented this just so you would have something to execute and sign, proving that you've done the necessary open meeting law training that the statute requires before you can be seated at every election cycle. And then finally, I've prepared a summary of your responsibilities as a board member. There's a couple of pages about things you must perform and a couple of pages about things you may perform. We went through the statute and synthesized the primary obligations of a board member and put them on in this packet. And you can see that we've highlighted the key words in each paragraph so you can quickly take a look at it and understand what the topic is. So we'll touch on some of those today, but not many. In 20 minutes, we're simply going to do the highlights today. I encourage you, in fact, if you're a new board member, you are obliged to get that 6 hours of training within 1 year of election. So I encourage you to attend the conference in this coming January. The classes I teach are some of the classes. There's many more that are taught there. It's a worthwhile endeavor. The law requires that the district pay your expenses for that. So there's no reason not to go if you can get away.
We'll get you the finest $36 hotel room in Lockwood.
Yes. It's the best ever if you love to smoke.
Yeah.
Number one is the stuff I like to start with because it's intended to scare everybody. As a board member, you're guilty of a class 2 misdemeanor all the way to a class 4 felony if you screw it up. This is important because you get paid big bucks to be a board member, and this is your reward. It's class 2 misdemeanors are what the statute imposes on you for failing to do something you're statutorily obliged to do. Class 2 misdemeanors aren't that big a deal sometimes. Spitting on the sidewalk, public nuisance is a class 2 misdemeanor. But with that comes things like being removed from the board, paying fines. There is a jail sentence associated with class 2 misdemeanor. Very few board members or fire chiefs have ever suffered for any of this, although has been a handful of board members and a handful of fire chiefs throughout the years that did some prison time for some of these infractions. Class 6 felony is a typical one that has specifically to do with conflicts of interest. and that's why we'll touch on that today. It's one you can easily stumble over. Open meeting law violations and conflict of interest are the big ones. Those are the things we see most often become a problem. Class 4 I mentioned in there because that's typically related to financial improprieties. There have been some employees over the years around the state that went to jail because they stole money. And this is the statute that deals with that. Number 2 is your use of personal phones and laptops. The public record laws say that anything you do associated with your job as a board member, any document you prepare or possess belongs to the district and is available to the public if they want to see it. This gets really weird in a hurry if you've done it on your phone or your personal laptop. Sedona does a nice job of making tablets available to you. Those tablets belong to the district. Everything on them belongs to the district. But there are many times that district members around the state use their own laptop and their own smartphones. And I have seen on several occasions someone asked to see your smartphone and the hard drive on your personal laptop computer and dissect it to see what's there. And they're entitled to do that unless that information has been appropriately preserved and copied onto a district server, as an example. And I think you guys do a very nice job of that. But my warning to you is, if you use your personal phone for any kind of business at all, texting another board member, it is available for subpoena if someone wants to see it. Number 3 is open meeting law violations. Those of you that are on the board know this quite well. Those of you that are just joining the board are aware that, or should be aware that there are 9 reasons you can go into executive session and only 9. I've provided a list for you of those items in your handout. It looks like this highlighted piece of the statute. And we're going to touch on these real briefly because I'm working on my 20 minutes. And we'll talk about it. Number 1 is employment. This is the thing that allows you to go into executive session to review the chief's performance. But it could be what you use to go into executive session to talk about any employee at all, if you wish. There are lots of rules that surround how you do that, but a special note is your obligation to give people like the fire chief a separate 24-hour notice that you're going to talk about them in executive session. And they have the right to say no. You have to do it in public. Number 2 is exempt records, mostly medical records in this industry, but any private records at all are subject to review in executive session only. There are about 200-300 documents mentioned under Arizona law that are considered confidential. Any of those, if you were going to have them in your possession and review them, you'd want to do that under item 2. Number 3 is for legal advice. The district can go into executive session for legal advice on any issue at any time it wants. You put a little paragraph up in the top of your agendas that says you can go into executive session for legal advice on any item on the agenda. And on occasion, you'll do that, even though you hadn't planned on it. You need some legal advice. You can vote to go into executive session. We can have an executive session to talk about the law and then go back out. Today, you're getting sort of legal advice in public session, which is legal if you wish to do it that way. And you did. Most of your conversations with me are behind closed doors for maybe obvious reasons. Number 4 is discussions. This is one of the few spots in the executive session where you can make a decision. You can't make any decisions in executive session except for number 4, 5, and 7. Number 4 is if you have a contract that you need to tell your lawyer what to do something about. It can be something as simple as the labor MOU, or it can be an IGA with another entity, or litigation. If anyone ever serves a notice of demand on the district, we go into executive session typically to talk about what that means and what the limitations are. There's a whole set of rules about how quickly somebody has to proceed when they sue a governmental entity. We tend to talk about that in executive session. Number 5 is the moment where you get to go into executive session to talk about labor negotiations. In that, you can also make, in number 4, you can tell your lawyer what to do. In number 5, you can tell management, like the chief, what to do in conjunction with MOU negotiations. Number 6 is international and interstate negotiations. This happens when you're, as an example, contracting, the districts on the river do it quite a bit, contracting with another jurisdiction across the river for mutual aid or automatic aid, or with a tribal nation. Number 7 is real property. This is the other one where the district can actually give instructions. If you're going to sell or buy real property, you can go into executive session to talk to the chief about it. Number 8 has to do with schools. We won't touch on that. And number 9 is security. This was added to the law fairly recently. It allows the board to go into an executive session to talk about your security efforts. Obviously, you don't want to talk about that in public, or then the world knows where you've got your cameras placed and what your codes are and that kind of thing. The next item under open meeting law is a little bit of a sampling, if you will. Open meeting law violations can happen quickly and usually out of ignorance. Very few people want to violate the open meeting law. On occasion, people are cavalier about it, but usually it's because they just don't understand it very well. The open meeting law says you can only talk about stuff that's on the agenda or reasonably related to it. And the test is whether or not a reasonable person would be able to look at the agenda and know what you're going to talk about. Recently, about 3 months ago, a case came down, and an attorney general opinion came down that talked about the 2x2x1 issue. I know some of you meet with the chief on a monthly basis to say hello. This opinion criticizes that effort. It doesn't say you can't do it, but you have to be very careful about how you share that information and the admonition you're supposed to use when you do it now. Some districts, this came up in Phoenix for a school district. They were having 2 board members meet with the superintendent, and then 2 more meet with the superintendent, and then 1 more. So all 5 met with the superintendent in the course of the month to get briefed before the next board meeting. And somebody turned them in, and the AG said, you can't do that unless you follow certain rules to make sure that you're not trying to get around the open meeting law. So when you decide to meet with management or the chief, you got to be careful. As board members, as long as you're not a quorum, that is to say you're not 3 board members, you can meet and chit chat all you want, as long as you're not doing it with the intent of trying to avoid the open meeting law. Courtesy notices, this district does a really nice job of that. The law does not require a courtesy notice, but you can issue one that says we're all going to get together at Dave's house for coffee and crumpets, and that's perfectly okay, as long as you're not talking about business when you do so. Public participation. Arizona is a non-participation state, actually. Members of the public are entitled to attend your board meetings. You can't stop it. They don't have to live in the district. They get to come listen, but they can only get to come listen. You have no obligation to let them participate. Some states require participation, and Arizona has, the legislature tried several times to force that onto you, but they have not yet done so. Contacts with the press, that's now permitted. This happened because of something that occurred in Scottsdale, and they adopted a rule that allows you to talk to the newspapers, and even if you're disclosed to a newspaper reporter how you're going to vote on something, that's okay, as long as you didn't do so for purposes of avoiding the open meeting law. Number 4, executive sessions. We just talked about that a little bit. The penalties are on the sheet that I've given you. It runs from $500 to $2,500 per violation. And this is almost always done inadvertently. Like I say, it's complicated enough that you can accidentally screw up on the open meeting law rules. And if you do, you can get fined for it. You can be removed from the board for it. And you can be forced to go to Phoenix and get some training with the Attorney General's office for it. Also, when you violate the open meeting law, there is a rule that allows people to invalidate what you've done. If you do that when you're adopting the budget, that can be a big deal, or purchasing equipment. So you have to be careful that you follow the open meeting law carefully when you're spending money. Number 5 is the conflicts of interest. There's a rule of law with a couple of exceptions that says you can't participate in anything that affects anybody that you're related to the 3rd degree. And I've provided to you a little chart that is way cool. See if I can find it here. Everything that's in yellow identifies people that you can't vote for. And so if they're on this list and you're considering voting on it or participating on a topic that relates to these people, you have to say, no, don't do it. Remove yourself from the board and don't participate. Violating these rules is a class 1 misdemeanor if it's accidental, or a class 6 felony if it's intentional. So it has some teeth behind the statute. And that comes up on a fairly regular basis, where you have to ask yourself if you have a conflict. If you think you do, you have to disclose it on the record and then step away from the table and not participate in the discussion or the vote. You can't talk about it. You can't encourage people to vote for it, et cetera. There is a rule of 10, which is why if you have an employee who is related to, you can still vote on it if it affects at least 10 people. And that's typically in your world, that would be adopting a budget. And if you have at least 10 employees, that budget affects all of them the same, or giving a raise or a COLA, those kinds of things would allow you to participate in that decision because it affects at least 10 people. There are rules in place that, can I ask you a question about that? Yeah.
So if you adopt, like you go through a wage analysis and you adjust a wage scale, if one of the people that's adjusted is like Matt, who is our only GIS person, can they approve the whole wage scale because it affects more than 10 people? Or because Matt's bump only affects his position, would they have to not deal with that part?
You know, and there's no case law that answers that exact question. So it becomes a matter of how conservative you want to be. I'm paid to be conservative, and so I'm disgustingly conservative about most things. And I would suggest to any board member who he's related to not vote on that. But there's a cogent argument that if all you're doing is voting on the entire budget, that's far enough removed that is not an issue. Because really the purpose of that rule is to prevent you from benefiting yourself or someone you're related to. And if you're voting on a big budget that touches him, the argument is that's too far removed from the risk they're trying to avoid. Because of the world I live in, I care about things like liability insurance and claims and those kind of things. I tell people not to do it. Protocol is the next one. This board does about as good a job as any I've seen. You run meetings with almost a perfect protocol. In your world, the chair reigns supreme, and you should always look to the chair for permission to speak. Chair gets to vote. That is not true under Robert's rules, but Robert's rules doesn't govern you. It is what you look to for guidance, but it's not the law. I think it's fair to suggest that you guys keep doing what you do well now, which is look to the chair for guidance. The chair reaches out and asks for motions to encourage somebody besides themselves to make the motion. And then you have to have a second. After the second, you have a discussion about the motion that's now been seconded, and then the vote. So really the discussion typically happens in two ways. Something hits the agenda, the chairman asks for a discussion. And then the chairman gets to that spot where they decide it's time to move. And the chairman asks for a motion, yay or nay, on the particular item. I hereby move to approve acquisition of a pumper truck for $350,000. Is there a second? Yes. Discussion again. Because now you're discussing the appropriateness of the motion itself that's been made. And then you move for a vote. The law also requires, for open meeting law purposes, that the minutes reflect who made the motion, who made the second, and who voted how. You can say unanimously approved, that's okay, but if it's not unanimous, each person has to be identified and how they voted. Your fiduciary duty is next. This is your big one in terms of responsibilities. It's not the big one in terms of violations, especially for Sedona, but for most districts, you don't get caught wrapped around the axle on violating your fiduciary duties very often, typically because you have great management. keeping you on task so that you don't inadvertently do it. You have to follow the state bidding requirements, of which very few apply to fire districts. So if you're not going to have to follow the state acquisition requirements, you also have your common law fiduciary requirements that say you got to get the best deal possible, reasonably under the circumstances, and that causes you to go to bid by policy. So you have a policy that says what you have to bid for and how big the number has to be and when you can do an emergency acquisition and who signs the checks and who's checking to verify that those signatures are valid, those kinds of things. That's all about meeting your fiduciary duty, not because the statute says how you handle that. It basically puts the burden on you to decide how to do it, and you've adopted a set of bylaws and procedures to do exactly that. Number 8 is the handbook. You've got a good one. It's been created and torn apart and adjusted and amended and over the years. I think Tricia actually developed your first handbook back in the day. Haven't seen her in a while. I hope she's doing well. But since then, it's been vastly improved. I thought that was great work on her part. It's gotten nothing but better. You have a great handbook, and you review it annually to see if there's any changes that need to be made, et cetera. And number 8 also mentions the statutory training. If you go to the conference in January, you'll probably have open meeting law training. We spend a couple of hours doing that. And then board liability and responsibilities, which is a much broader presentation of the same topics we've touched on here today. Number 9 is posting. Once again, management takes care of this for you, but you need to at least be aware of it so you can double check to make sure it's happening. The law requires that you post these meetings at least 24 hours ahead of time. But there are a couple of exceptions. The emergency exception is available to you even though you failed to post it. The minute you find out that you haven't posted it, you can declare an emergency if it has to happen right away and you don't have time to do another 24-hour notice, right up until an hour before the meeting if you have to. But there are rules in place that say if you decide to declare an emergency, you have to do it on the minutes, do it on the record. I'm declaring an emergency and here's why. And then within 24 hours, you have to post it to let the public know why you did it. So it's kind of like you have to eat some crow right in front of the public within one day after you've had an emergency meeting. This has happened around the state a couple of times when someone forgot to post adoption of their budget and they had to get it to the County Board of Supervisors in a timely way. They didn't have time to revisit it and repost it, so they just declared an emergency and adopted their budget. And then ratification is a great way of fixing an open meeting law violation. If you find out that you violated the open meeting law, let's say you adopted this budget and it wasn't on the agenda, and you didn't do it on an emergency because you didn't think about it at the time, you can still fix it by ratification. Within 30 days of discovering that you violated the open meeting law, you can post a 3-day notice instead of a 24-hour notice and put it on the agenda to ratify. Now, just like emergency sessions, you have to post something during that 72-hour period that tells the world about your violation of the open meeting law and why you're going to ratify it to fix it. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's very effective, and it ratifies it retrospectively so that if it's the adoption of the budget you're talking about, you can put it on an agenda and ratify the adoption, and it's as if you timely approved the budget back when you should have done it. And so ratification and emergency meetings are kind of the exception to the 24-hour rule if you need them. Very handy. Don't get in the habit of using them because it means you're not paying careful enough attention to the rules when you do it. Number 10, we've talked about the certificate of compliance. That's just for you to sign and keep with your oath of office when you get elected. And number 11 are the powers. And I won't go through them all today, but I'm happy to chat about them with you if anyone feels the need. We review these in great detail at the upcoming conference if you wish. But the statute has split your role into 2 sections. One is things you must do, and there's about 30 of them on here, I think. 33 of them on this list. And then things you may do, but you're not obliged to, and there's 22 of those. But there are several other things scattered throughout the statute that aren't on this list, but these are the primary ones. And this includes everything from hiring people to buying equipment, to selling stuff, to hiring a fire chief, to terminating people, setting salaries, all of this. And the lesson in this set is to encourage you to keep in mind that you're responsible fiduciarily. You're not responsible for an operations issue. You hire good people to run the operations, and you're responsible for spending the money in a fiduciarily compliant way. That's my 20 minutes. So if there's any more, I'm happy to answer questions. That's a bunch. My apologies for blowing through it.
Well, Bill, thank you. And I'm going to turn to Diana and Lance and say, I remember as I sort of dove into this, it feels like a lot, but if you have questions, this is a good time if you've got them to ask.
I can tell you that from a leadership perspective, when I left being a part of the bargaining unit over into the evils of management, our council definitely was a lifesaver. So I will depend on you, sir, but you have a great reputation with this board and this community.
I'd also offer that beyond Mr. Whittington, our staff's pretty well versed as well as our board members, and then you'll find your comfort zone with as you navigate stuff. But if you're always open and available to talk to Mr. Whittington, and just as a point of courtesy, I think it's best, and correct me if I'm wrong, to just advise you that they're speaking with Bill. Just
I'm glad you mentioned that. When the district hired me 30 years ago or whatever it was, you adopt a resolution, and that resolution says that anytime you make contact with legal counsel, you're obliged to let the board chair know so that the district can control that flow of information and the cost.
And it's not for fear of you asking hard questions. It's just, one, it eliminates the potential for two people doing the same thing, and two, frankly, you may have an issue that the board chair should know about, and in the board chair's discretion to advise me of the situation or not. But just tight communication modeling ensures that we stay on the right path.
Mr. Whittington, have you been informed yet of the after dates for January?
Yes.
You have, you know them?
I'm going to say on the 15th.
Yeah, January 15th to 17th.
To the 17th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They haven't posted on the website yet, but the class is out.
Okay.
Look forward to seeing you there.
We just wish it was somewhere other than Laughlin.
Yeah.
It's at the beautiful Aquarius,
Oh, yeah.
the luxurious.
Okay. So moving on to something a little jazzier, let's say, legal responsibility. I'm going to ask Chief Mizoulis to talk to us a little bit about the key challenges and opportunities and things that you need to know about, and just sort of update you again with the idea of when you join the board officially in January, up to speed. So, Chief.
Yeah, so we have the potential exists for the next few months for each forward focus with the district. We've got one fire station that we need to replace. We've got another one that we, through a handshake deal in the 70s, own half of the building, and the other half is owned by some folks that have indicated they'd like us to vacate, but they haven't given us a date to vacate. So there's a need to evaluate moving that station. The Station 4 project is in Uptown and built in 1972, agreed that it needed to be replaced in 1996. Attempts and as-built drawings through the 2000s, the economy tanked. We attempted a bond that failed. Since then, our board has diligently saved money for that project, not for the entirety of the project, but it is a recognized and well-funded deal. And current status is we've got a meeting in December, second meeting with the city of Sedona, and we're working towards potentially acquiring some land the city owns and or a trade and or a couple other options, but we're in active conversation right now for that. We're also in conversation with Slide Rock State Park to potentially move our station there. And I will gladly fill you in at another time on the detailed process of working with the Land and Water Conservation Act of 1965 to exchange land between a government entity and a state park. It's an hour conversation, but that's ongoing. And then we're at the beginning stages of a complete radio system upgrade. You know, all the parts that I don't know what they do, that Bob, our IT guy, does, are in need of repair. More importantly, we're starting with the foundation. You know, over the years, for example, we have 3 different generator sets at the tower sites, which is required for emergency power. And the efficiencies there and their age, they need to be replaced. We need to rewire some redundancy into the different sites. And we've got sites on every mountaintop you can see from here, every fire station and areas in between. So it's a pretty comprehensive project, and a project that has it's a system that has only been maintained and band-aided, not because we don't have good people, but our communications division lost most of its employees, and until recently it was a one-person show. So as you can imagine, when you're one person managing what was meant for a division, most of your days are spent with band-aids and baling wire. And so that's a big project. And those are the 3 major projects that are infrastructure that have a lot of dollars attached to them. And the second thing we kind of talked about earlier is recruitment and retention. It used to be we could throw out an advertisement and get 100, 150 applications. Now we're getting 22. And for operations staffing. And that's not unique to Sedona Fire. That's public service in general, police and fire across the country, but in the state. Conference in Laughlin about recruitment retention. I guarantee there's going to be slots for that because that's one of the biggest battles. Retention is a concern of ours as well. As you learned today, a lot of our staff have been here a long time. But the market is competitive, and with our employee group specific in operations, living at farther rings from district, as you get older or start a family or something, sometimes it's easier to not make this commute and work somewhere else. And so we're working on mechanisms for retention. And with that, again, succession planning, it's critical that we make our folks aware of the opportunities that exist and guide them towards getting the necessary training and education to be ready for those positions. And it's a lift. And then you will also be jumping in right before we start budget season, and that's a multi-month process. And this year it's pretty smooth. If I would say, you know, based on years past, we've got a good system. We contract with a company called James Vincent Group to do our finances. I believe they manage, I think it's 35 fire districts finances now. So we get a team of people for the cost of one, and we get somebody that is continuously exposed to multiple districts around the state. So when we look at recruitment, retention, we look at trends in financing, we look at, you know, are people bonding? Are they borrowing? Are they paying cash? It's a really good resource for us from a financial standpoint, because what used to be a week and a half of waiting on 30 people to respond to an email or a phone call, it's you call JVG and they have the flavor of what's going on in the state. So and then they provide a really good monthly budget summary to the board. And but also with budget season this year, every other year we enter our meet and confer process with our labor groups. And how that works is the labor groups will identify opportunities to modify, improve, or change things as they relate to wages, benefits, or working conditions. And we sit down and program those things into the budget, cost them out, negotiate, and then build a presentation for the board. So that'll be something we're jumping into as well. But that and 100 other things is what's going on right now.
And I would add one other thing, just you mentioned it earlier about the strategic plan.
Yes.
The hope is that we will have a strategic plan for the board to look at at the January board meeting, to be approved at the February meeting, so that it can also inform the budget process, so that we align our budget with the priorities that we've identified in our strategic plan. So I think that's going to be another major and important step forward.
And it's the difficulty has increased, not in budgeting, but in capital forecasting, because a fire truck, for example, was $500,000 a few years ago and took 8 months to get, and now it's $1 million and takes 4 years to get. So when we're saying we need this, then we now need to order it sooner, which complicates the budgeting process for that. So it's been interesting. The post-COVID world has been an interesting place to try to keep government stuff running.
So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about what to expect in some next steps. And probably one of the easy things to do is to refer you to your handbooks. Sorry, folks, that you won't have the handbooks, but in the handbooks at the very beginning, there is a page that is called the checklist of critical first activities. And I don't know how you all are, but I certainly like to know the things I absolutely have to do in a sequence and when. And so this page was put together. So there are some things that you will need to do before your first official or before your term of office begins. And I would say for this, Kim is the contact to know. She's going to be the one who's tracing to make sure that we, number one, have for each of you an oath of office, and that you've had the opportunity to review the open meeting law. You've had some of it today, but I do encourage you to take a moment to go to the ARS, which number we have, ARS 38-431.01, and take a look at it.
If I might,
Yes.
each board member is obliged to go on the county's website and look at the open meeting law materials that they've published there. It'll take you an hour maybe to review it all, but that is the official open meeting law material you're supposed to touch.
Which county?
Yavapai County.
We don't hand them out. Okay, that's when I started, it was handed out.
No, I don't, not with me. It's changed. Bill, my question for you is, would you happen to know, because the information we have here is just the ARS, would you happen to know what the link is to that?
My staff does, and I'll have them send it to all the board members.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah. We'll also ask you to sign a compliance statement, and Kim, I'm assuming you have the compliance statements for people to sign, not today, but you will have them.
I provided one to everybody today.
Right.
That compliance statement I provided to you today.
Oh, okay, great. Excellent. And then the conflict of interest disclosure form, obviously a contact information form, and the receipt, acknowledgement of receipt that you have this thing. That's basically what you got to do. And as Bill has mentioned, within the first year, you will need to get the 6 hours of training, professional development training from AFTA. And that can be done, as Bill said, either not in Laughlin at the meeting in January, or there's also a meeting in Glendale
In June.
in June. So,
You can do the videos.
or you can do it online, which I don't recommend, but
Oh, see, because it was COVID,
yes, and I did it too.
I did it online. I loved it online
Okay, great.
because you got to stop it when you had to. You got to take notes while it was great.
Great, good. So what you just see is the difference in responses to online learning.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And if you are available to attend Laughlin or the Glendale conference, the benefit is there's board members from around the state, so that the networking opportunities to kind of, it'll help drive home the point Bill made that not all boards are built the same. I'll leave it at that.
We do miss that.
And I would add to that, even though I much prefer the location of the Glendale conference, that as a board member, I encourage you to go to Laughlin at least once, because the Laughlin meeting is really geared for board members. The Glendale meeting is AFTA plus the Fire Chiefs Association is much more geared towards fire chiefs. And so just depending on what perspective you want, they're both good, but that I would certainly encourage at a one-time visit to Laughlin. Sorry, what?
And smoked at Laughlin
Oh,
companies.
and the smoke at Laughlin, yes, there's make great pleasures in Laughlin.
Referring to cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
This is a casino setting. Now, not in the meeting rooms, but you do need to walk through the casino setting usually to get to the meeting rooms.
The other thing that I would ask is that for each board meeting, Kim will be sending out a board packet or notifying you that it's available online, and that we'll talk about IT stuff. I'll let Josh do that later. But basically, I ask that you would review the packet and have gone through it, and certainly if you have detailed questions, feel free to ask them at the meeting, or if you want to chase down someone before that, feel free.
And if I may,
Yeah.
that's really important to me and staff because we're confident in what we do. However, we like orderly meetings, and it's not a cheat code, but what ultimately, especially in budget season, if there's a change, a dramatic change to expenditures or something add to the budget that you're concerned about, getting clarification on that, because sometimes it put on the spot in a board meeting. With our desire as staff is to give you the answers that you need and that you seek. And if, some of these require some drilling into different, softwares or packages to get that information for you. And it's not fun to say, thank you for the question, I'll get back with you next, and you have to wait a month to talk about it. If we can kind of know some of your concerns, we can have that information prepared for you and keep the process more smooth.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing I would say is that if it comes a bit of news is we have a schedule, and it is actually in the very back of your binders under the resources section. And you will see there a schedule for bill paying. One of the pleasures you'll have is once every 5 weeks, you get to pay the bill and approve the bills. And sign checks is an ongoing activity. But this is the schedule. It's in here. It is draft, so if there can be changes, but this gives you an idea of when we will be asking you to use bill.com to pay the bills, and you will get educated on bill.com before you have to pay the bills. But just to let you know that that's coming. I'd also point out to you, by the way, that on the page ahead of that are the proposed board meeting date. And again, this is labeled draft because it has not been approved by the board as yet. But we give you opportunity to put this in your calendar. And along with that, I would say to you, this is a personal request from the chair. One of my times of asking, please, if you think you're going to miss a meeting, to please let me know, because it is important. We do have a quorum of 3 people. This was, things happen, but just let me know that you're not going to be able to make the meeting. But I also urge you to put all these dates in your calendar. So you know when.
But I wanted to touch on bill.com is a software we use it's clarity and accountability, and it's basically the release button so that we can generate checks and payments to our vendors. And when the board gets those, it's already passed through one or two or three different levels of management for approval. We do the same process that the board ultimately does. One good thing about the software is it's a good checks and balance, and two, it clearly identifies what it is month by month we're spending our dollars on and the taxpayers' dollars. So that, and more than once, I've had the opportunity, a board member will say, hey, I see a lot of, do we cheat them and how bills? What's that all about? And I can explain what's going on. And so, but the criticality of being on your bill.com when it's your week is we can't release payment to vendors until the process is complete. And it just, we don't want to, we try to do 15, maybe 30 days for payout. If we have a good bill.com process, we can stick to that, keep our vendors happy.
So a couple of other things while we're talking about board meetings, possibilities and things. One of the things I've learned in the process of moving into the role of chair is that different chairs have different styles. And it's all good. It's all good. But one of the things that you will find that I do on motions is I will call for a motion. And in calling for the motion, that doesn't mean I'm making the motion. I'm looking to one of the other board members to say either I so move or I move and repeat the motion. And I say that because the board's gotten in the habit of the chair making the motion, the next person second. So I'm asking you to get out of the habit and I will call for motions. And I do this very simply because I want all involved in the motions, not just my making the motion and do second. So just a bit of protocol. The other thing I would say is that the chief has been wonderful and the staff has been wonderful about inviting, stop in, to, visit stations, be visible. You will see, I know Matt has put all of our pictures up at various times. It's not up there now.
It'll be up in a minute.
Yeah, up there on the screens. So you'll be visible. We want the firefighters to know who the board are and to know you. Having said that, what I would ask as a courtesy is that if you are visiting a station, just let the chief know. Just say, hey, I'm stopping off at station 4 today, or I stopped off at station 4 today, so that he's aware of that.
And how do we do that?
You'll have all my numbers and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, it's not oh darn, I'm worried about them catching the guys doing something. It's just, we've got a busy training schedule this time of year particularly. And it's your time. And if you make the effort to go out and visit a station, you don't know that, they're all at station 4 today training all day and they won't be there. And so it's just to help you as well. And it's efficiencies.
The other thing I would say is, and this has not happened to me, but I think it's a good caution, is in visiting stations, it may be that a firefighter raises an issue with you. And sometimes they look at us to have answers. And that's a time to use the chain of command, to refer them back to the chain of command. But if you feel that the issue is serious and significant, then you need to bring it to the chief and let him know. But we're not entitled to help them jump the chain of command. If whatever their need or request is, we can just hear it, take it in, pass it on. So that's that. Last things that I wanted to cover, your swearing in will be December 17th at the board meeting. I'm looking for that, and your first official meeting is the January board meeting. We will look forward to seeing you then. And in December, we'll also be celebrating and mourning for our exiting board members as well.
And I had a question for Mr. Whittington. So we're swearing in on December 17th. I understand they don't seat till the January board meeting, but we do have the joint city meeting on the 18th. Are they technically not a board member yet? So, because they've been sworn in, or
When's the city meeting?
it's the day after they're sworn in? I know it's gray as heck. That's why I asked.
I'm thinking.
It just costs more money. Don't be excited.
Wow. Yeah, and my gut is no, they won't be able to participate in after that, but I'll check the statute to make sure that's true.
My concern was if they were available to attend that meeting and instead of spending 20 minutes explaining to the city council that they're board members, but they're not, and because if we get into a conversation that's gonna lead towards a decision about what our next steps, I didn't want you guys to be put on the spot where, well, I'm sworn in, but can I say anything or in what capacity am I speaking? And I just wanted to make sure it's clean.
I'll have my staff confirm that and send you a
Okay.
note.
Okay.
So we've been doing a lot of talking. All have been doing a lot of this. Do you have any questions or anything you want to know from us or anyone in the room?
If labor reps are here. If you have any questions about that process, we can answer anything. Mr. Soto's been very quiet.
I have. I've been observing and admiring the new leadership that will be partaking in that has already taken place. But, I've been in your shoes. Everybody here has been in your shoes where you're coming in. And this meeting that we're holding today, this orientation, we've never done before. Yet we've made a lot of changes up until this time from the past, and it's only gotten better. And this is another step in getting better. You get to put a face to a name, to a position, and who's doing what at one session. We were on our own getting that. But one thing also is that the ability to get the board together on a particular subject, thereby the chair calling for a motion to be made by anybody on the board, is still a direct reflection of the chairperson running that meeting as she sees fit, and then allowing the rest of the board to become part of what that decision or that motion is going to be. So that is a good thing. I think we got away from that a little bit, only to save time. Because a lot of times, one of my goals was to never really have Bill speak. Because if he spoke, that means I laid short or I didn't understand. And sometimes the motions were kind of involved, and of course, my reply to a lengthy motion was so moved. That was it. And then we would find the second and then any further discussion. So it causes you to truly, truly stay focused on what the topic is on that agenda, to review that packet on that Thursday through the Tuesday before the meeting, and line out what your questions are going to be or what concerns you may have. And oftentimes, communications to the board from staff will have a suggested motion on the bottom. Remember, all motions should be placed in a positive format, okay? So that they're very consistent in how they're laid out. So it's not that the board chair is going to call on you particularly to make a motion, but the motion will be, spread out throughout the board. You'll see a trend as time moves on. At the beginning, you'll probably not have a lot to say, but as time moves on, you'll start chiming in. And, or if you're, of boards like to be on boards, you might, that time would be much shorter. So, yeah, I think we're in a good spot with where we're going. We've come a long way. We've got a great chief, great staff, great legal advice, and it's up to our chair to keep it all together, like a coach of an all-star team, the great facilitator. So good luck to both of you guys. It's not quite my swan song, but just words of advice.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I want to say that I echo everything that Dave said. And in closing, what I'd say is if you do have questions, I urge you to turn to your handbook. There's a lot of things in here. And if you add the things that Bill, and some of the things Bill gave you, we have, but I'm delighted that he's added what he did. We have in here, in addition to a brief bit of background, the board roles. And one of the things you'll see, by the way, on the board roles is, if you look on page 13, there's a section that's highlighted in yellow. And the reason for that is because one of the things the board's going to need to do is address the philosophy. Is this the philosophy that we want to have along with our leadership team? So it's a task to come. After that, we have the rules of procedure, which will tell you a lot about how we operate and function as a board. There's copies of the board policies. There's an org chart here and a copy of the budget for this year, which will be useful to you when we get into budget season, because it becomes the comparative. It'll also give you an opportunity to get familiar with the format that is used for the budget. And I will tell you that was an adjustment for me, getting used to the format for the budget, because it's unlike any budget format I've seen before.
And most of that is driven by statute.
Yeah.
And it's not our neat idea about budget. It's how the state is mandated. We present the budget.
Yeah, it does. I was wondering why yours didn't.
That's right. There's also a copy of the current MOU with our labor partners. And at the very back, in addition to the proposed board meeting dates and the bill.com date, there's also a phone list for all of the people here at the district. There's also a list of our employees. And what I realized is that you don't have, we'll have to give you a board contact list as well. That isn't in here, but we will get that to you, so you have all of our phone numbers. And with that, unless there are other questions, other comments, anything that anyone wants to add? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, Janet.
No problem. Sure.
Good to see you.
It was good to see you as well, sir.
Say hey to your folks for me.
Yeah, I'm shooting at some mom right now. I'm on an interview with the county school superintendent. I'm on the school board for.
They're okay. Hey, like I said, I'll keep them around.
They said, what, do you know what your job is as a board member?
They keep me around because they know they're gonna need my help. Getting older, you know.
Yeah.
What else? I said, hire and fire. Superintendent, you gotta approve the budget.
Yeah, as far as continuing education, I'm only required
It's as simple as
to
that.
do the 6 hours within a year. But we
No.
do whatever we realize or as a district, keep everybody up.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like for new members, as long as they finish 1 year this year, they're not required to go to AFTA, but if we wanted them to for anything specific, otherwise we might just have like a training session.
Perfect.
So
Yeah, it's a
someone.
lot of the districts, they just have me come once a year to review.
Yeah.
We'll let you know about the meeting.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to attend that meeting.
You're all done.
Okay.